Welcome all comers to the discussion about what counts and how to count and why count. And now in order to support our conversations, we're going to do the old-fashioned thing of distributing handouts around the tables. We did not anticipate this many people, so there probably won't be a handout for every single human being, but you can share. And for just the bulk of this session will be in discussion, so we definitely encourage consolidating to fill up tables if you can. This session is what counts when re-engaging youth. We'll also take volunteers to help hand out handouts. Who has that classroom experience that you're just dying to use here? Okay, looks like most of the filtering has happened. And then, again, we'll probably make another invitation to consolidate at tables for discussion in a little while. But we're going to start with welcome and introductions, talk about this continuum of data collection opportunities that you see up on the screen. And then we're going to spend the bulk of this time in discussion at your tables or sustain silent work on your own individual part. So this is a real good opportunity to go deep on what counts and why. And in case you don't know, in case you can't read from afar, I'm Andy Moore with the National League of Cities Institute for Youth Education and Families and the convener of the Reengagement Network, a longtime partner of the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions.
And I'm Mary Zanotti, Executive Director with Colorado Youth for a Change. We are a nonprofit organization that partners with school districts across the state of Colorado to work with students that have dropped out and help them in re-engaging. And also we have several dropout prevention programs.
And a member of the Denver OYF team?
I am, yeah. And the National League of Cities Reengagement Network.
Right. So Mary and I are going to try to tag team on a little bit of just exposing you to how we've been thinking about the data collection continuum and what to count and why. And we'll be interested in your feedback on that, and we'll try to give you some examples along the way. And that's the purpose of the handouts also, is to populate this continuum with some tangible examples for you. So when we think about the broad sweep of why collect data in the field of re-engagement or opportunity youth, you might collect it for program improvement. You might collect it in order to advocate for system change, or you might collect it in order to make the case publicly and build public will. Or you may want to use data for all three purposes. We've isolated out 4 points on a continuum with this extremely sophisticated slide. And so we want to talk about each of those as an opportunity. There's probably a prior point which may have come under some discussion in your city or community, and that is the establishment of early warning systems in schools as a key measure to try to prevent disconnection. We're not going to dwell on that today. We're mainly thinking about the recovery or reconnection side of things in the Opportunity Youth world. So let's start with conducting a segmented data analysis. You heard from Monique at the podium that Boston's first run at this needed a refresh, and Boston found a local funder and went back to dig deep into the data to use that to at least understand who's in the dropout and struggling student population who might need additional supports and services as Opportunity Youth. And then to find out things like how many are young, old, close, far to graduation, how many are poised to springboard into post-secondary, who might need additional supports. So that's the wisdom behind a segmented data analysis, and Mary was going to talk a little bit about how this has been used in, this method has been used in both Denver and the suburban community of Aurora.
Yeah, so you have the Denver handout, hopefully. That kind of is an example. So in Denver, they did their segmentation data really on all their students. So what are their ages, what are their credits, how many students are falling into those buckets, who's falling behind. And they were really able to then develop multiple pathways to meet the needs of each one of those segments. So you'll see, it goes down to a first or second year and a half student with less than 30 credits, up to a fourth year or more than a half year student with 90 plus credits, or fifth year with 60. I mean, they get really, really detailed. And on the other side, you'll see that then they made sure they had schools outside of their traditional high schools that were able to meet the needs of each of those segments. And so they really used the data to map students to the right school choice so that they can then graduate on time, or hopefully by their fifth year. So Denver has a number of multiple pathways and obviously a lot of resources to kind of create this system. Where the work we did in Aurora, we were, almost 10 years ago now, doing outreach to all the young people that have dropped out of school in Aurora. And through that one-on-one, kind of why did you drop out? Why are you leaving school? What is your profile? What is your credits? What are your transcripts? And looking at all of those, we were able to get a lot of information on where were the gaps, what students weren't being served in Aurora, and able to then help identify and create some specific schools for that gap. So we created a school for students that were over age, 18, 19, sometimes 20, with not even freshman credits, and really working with them on a GED, but what's next? So concurrent enrollment into post-secondary as well. So these were all students that wanted to go back, wanted to further their education, but it was so late, and there was no other option in the district in order for them to get that diploma by the time they were 21.
So is this coming to life for you, the role of a segmented data analysis, provoking any questions?
The only question I have is around re-engagement, as far as in how do you define it if it's not used in a school context? Because a lot of times that's almost, the school is the next step, the precursor, the prerequisite to that is just getting them assimilated back into some type of structure of life.
So in our program, our re-engagement efforts, really, we don't have a center. We go out and our staff work to find those young people, connect with them, find out why they left, and help kind of connect them to resources to reduce any barriers to why they left in the first place. And then we walk them through school tours. We stick with them. We visit them in a school once they've been re-enrolled into a school. So for us, it really is about that school piece and kind of wrapping around them in the actual school.
Yeah, the re-engagement world has really adapted good positive youth development techniques. So there's this emphasis on establishing a caring adult relationship after the moment of initial outreach and leading through the often complicated process, the paperwork process of re-enrolling in school, before that even determining the best school option locally, and then after the moment of re-enrollment, not letting the young person down or not severing the connection, but maintaining the connection so that they feel supported, especially in the early weeks and months after initial re-enrollment. Are we getting at your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Thank you.
When it comes to the schools and the segments, so sort of trying to encourage specialization and who is your program designed to serve best, I wonder if there are any, can you characterize the differences across the schools based on the segmentation? So I get that for much older young people who are very credit deficient, you're sort of proposing a GED plus kind of option, but are there other big generalizations you can make about the different schools for the different, that work best for the different segments?
Yeah, I think there are different, so not just working towards a GED, but it might be a school that has Hexters, so 6 weeks, where students can rapidly earn credits and graduate with their diploma on time. There's other schools that have more mental health support for students that are displaying, they're so far behind because of other things that are happening in their life. I think it ends up being a lot, there's some that are just credit recovery, but there's mixed opinions on that as well. But I think it's more about the supports that those students end up needing to be showing up every day and getting what they need then to graduate on time.
I think the one other model I would add to that list is a concurrent enrollment model, such as Gateway to College, where young people are judged to be ready for college-level work, and they're completing their high school requirements while also starting to accumulate college credits. So, are we on your question, yeah. Nicole? Yeah.
Hi, Andy.
Hey there.
Liz from San Francisco. The most difficult piece, I think, is building that public will. And we have, even with the data, been trying to demonstrate to the powers that be the importance of creating different systems, blowing up the old system, re-engaging people. Can you give us some examples of other things that you had to do to build public will, if you would? Thank you.
Yeah, the general principle, I think, is probably one you're already pursuing, Liz, which would be, find a champion within the district. It may not be at the ultimate top level, but if it's the district you need to interact with, or in the California structure, County Office of Education, who's going to be your ally and internal salesperson, and to keep bringing it up. That's one very general principle. I wonder if anybody in the room who has undertaken a segmented data analysis could talk about how they used it for these building public will purposes.
Can I just add, it's kind of work counter for us. And we work with young people in the juvenile justice and the foster care system. And they've since written legislation that allows those young people to graduate with as few as, half as many credits as the rest of the comprehensive students. And it's, it's kind of good and bad. It's kind of worked against us in demonstrating this need.
I see.
And so those young people still aren't ready for post-secondary, still aren't ready for the workforce. So I'm interested in hearing other strategies. Thank you.
I think we'll talk more about public will building as we go on, but anybody else, Kathy, could I put you on the spot to say, how you're, in the short term here, planning to use your new segmented data analysis to, get to higher ups or quote unquote build public will?
First of all, I have influence and not authority, so it is trying to get people to pay attention to it. So we have a collective impact coalition around the dropout issue, distinct from the opportunity youth. It's been going on forever, and So we're kind of using that group to kind of communicate in inside and outside ways with the school district. Like the city council just had a hearing because the city council always likes to try to get the mayor, and it was the mayor appoints the superintendent and school committee. So, but we use it as an opportunity to really shine a light on the issues because the findings are really grave. I mean, not just about the alternatives, but about school district assignment and segregation by kind of advantage. So we're really just using any moment we can to put the report in front of groups of people and policymakers so that they will, and then through the Reengagement Center, actually, the back door, we sit with the alt-ed directors and with the folks that are leading the internal process, and we're feeding them Reengagement Center data on the youth who get into programs and the youth who don't get into programs. Because for years, we've been seeing the old and far, like kids that are 18, 19, very few credits, not get placements, especially when they're special ed students. So we're actually bringing that in the back door and sharing it with the implementation team too.
Yeah, super helpful. Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, and we can iterate more on this, Liz. You put a really important question on the table. So let's keep marching through the continuum and talk about the other tools that you have in front of you so that we can get to table level discussion. So the way I define this next step on the continuum or next position is about analyzing local alternative education capacity. So say you want to go out and re-engage students, where the heck are you going to send them, and what is the mix of alternative ed schools, knowing that in most cases, sending them back to their school of origin is a non-starter. So, as Kathy and others have long argued, this is our policy push methodology in the re-engagement world, where one reason to analyze local alternative education capacity is to show how short you are, how many changes need to be made, what new kinds of schools need to be stood up or expanded. So this is a critical step, and you have a tool on your tables that you can reference for just a very simple chart that you could take and make as complicated as you want, but it's been used to good effect in a few places around the country to do that mapping. I mean, this is something that a smart summer intern could do, or a graduate student or somebody like that. It doesn't require the time of a professional staff person to start to lay this map out. And then those who are making policy decisions can meet about, well, what are the implications of what we're finding in terms of capacity? Anything to add here, Mary?
No, but I'm not sure everyone has that handout because some people look really confused. No.
This is one with a re-engagement network label on the top.
It might be, is it?
Liz is holding it up.
No.
Thank you.
Oh, did everyone get that one? It's like a worksheet.
And if there's a means afterward through Aspen to circulate these all, they're publicly available. I'm eager to get them out across the landscape. So,
And we can share some when we break.
thanks,
into
Liliana.
groups.
Okay. Any questions about that mapping exercise, or just understanding the local capacity and the nuances of what's out there in the alt-ed landscape? Making sense? So let's move on to collecting internal data, primarily for program monitoring, for answering these key questions of what effects are we having, who are we doing our best job of re-engaging, and what kind of outcomes are we producing? So, Mary, I think you're going to talk a little bit more about how you do this internally at Colorado Youth for a Change, which has wonderfully had some foundation investments over the years to really grow its so-called data muscle in the same way that the new Equity Counts initiative hopes to do across the Aspen sites.
Yeah, we were able to participate in a cohort with the Ed McConnell Clark Foundation in 2012 and really establish our program model and theory of change, and then develop a data system that really closely links to that. And so there's 3 handouts that are specific to Colorado Youth for a Change there. And in our data and how we're using our data, 2 of those are, we collect all this data internally on how we're doing our work, how many attempts we make with our students, who are our students, why are they leaving. We use our data system to make sure that no students are falling through the crack, that we are making all the attempts we can that we say we're going to do with each student, and so our system can help us monitor that. So we're looking at that data. But then we also provide our school district partners with regular data updates and program updates using that information. And so you'll see there's a report, our end-of-year report to Boulder and Denver that are listed there. And through that data, we're able to really also kind of build some of that public will district by district and really show them, we're seeing trends in students dropping out of particular schools. We can sometimes have data even on, the classes that they're failing the most, the teachers that's giving the most Fs, all of these, kind of nitty-gritty details so that we can get to some real change in those districts.
Yeah, so for those of you who are looking at Mary's handout or want to think more about using data internally for program monitoring, any questions or comments about what you're seeing on paper or what you just heard from Mary?
The other one, that one. Yep.
The one that starts out with white at the top? Okay.
Yeah.
And if not, then, go ahead.
Wait.
Hang on, here's a mic coming.
Here you go.
Is there any data that also pulls in those providers who don't tend to be structured school environments that are working with the same youth to kind of make an additional comparison?
So we don't have the capability to pull in data from other providers. I mean, in our OY group in Denver, we definitely can share some data, not down to the student level, but to see who's doing what with similar populations. As an organization, we do track who else is working with our young people, but as far as outcome-wise, we don't know.
Charlotte, can I put you on the spot to talk about the data framework in Phoenix? Okay.
So, and Kristen probably can speak to this better than I can. So in the Phoenix area, we're a collective impact model. ASU is our backbone currently for the Opportunities for Youth initiative. There's about 13 youth organizations. Am I right? 13 at this point? 14. We keep adding. So, and we have decided upon data metrics collectively and have been collecting this data for about a year now. And Kristen can actually speak a little more intelligently about those actual numbers. I know she can rattle them off. I think last year, Kristen, we had about 3,000 young people that we impacted. Is that correct? All right. And so one of our challenges has that is emerging is that we are all different in how we're collecting that data. And so that's been a part of this initiative is how can we collect this data more uniformly so that we're telling the right story. And so we're currently working towards how we can resolve that issue. But 14 organizations with different funding streams, different main softwares that they have to report into, have agreed to come to the table and collectively gather data.
Those are nice indicators of progress. Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah. And is it primarily for externally facing results data, or is it also used for data that can be used for program improvement?
Yes, we're sharing the data collectively, so it's not just for being able to report out on what we're doing as a collective, but we're actually using the data to help inform our decision making, and we're using our quality standards as a way to also measure impact.
Yeah. And Hannah, have you put something similar in place among the Reconnect opportunity providers? We're wondering if across King County or across the roadmap set of providers, if there's similar agreement on what to collect, what data to collect for program improvement.
Yes, we have come up with some common measures, and they're typically around enrollment, retention, and who's completing.
Okay.
And then recently, because a majority of our programs offer some employment services either directly or through a partner, we have a couple of measures that we added in terms of employment experiences or internship or something like that.
Excellent, thanks. Thanks for letting me put you on the
Can I
spot.
add one
Yeah.
more thing?
Yeah.
We're also, our programs don't all use a common data system, but they've all, for the most part, many have agreed to share certain data points with us quarterly. We are asking them to, in terms of credential completion, and that could be GED or it could be an industry credential or a diploma, we ask them to disaggregate by race and ethnicity. And we're seeing really serious disproportionality in terms of which populations are earning credentials in programs. And so now we're starting to dig into that more with programs and really try to unpack why are especially Latinx students not earning credentials when it's the largest subgroup enrolled in the program. So we're just starting to kind of dig a little deeper on some of the harder issues.
Thanks for that. Really, that's a really tangible and concerning example about using data for program improvement. And I'm also going to take the segue from Hannah to go to just the fourth block here on the continuum, and that is using data to understand results and probably report them out publicly, and also track trends year to year to year. So in the Reengagement network, which has a more than 50% overlap with Aspen sites, there's public agreement. We went through a process and people agreed to collect at least a few common data measures on things such as how many young people did you reach out to? How many actually re-enrolled then of that group? Of that group who re-enrolled, how many persisted in school for the ensuing school year? And then of that group, how many actually got to graduation or credential? So our tool for collecting those results data and some other, and then some demographics as well, and some other characteristics of the participants, is the annual re-engagement census. So I provided two handouts here just to for those who are not familiar with it. One is the annual report that we issue, the first couple of pages of that annual report, where we try to give our top line findings across the 20 local re-engagement sites plus 2 statewide networks. What are we seeing across these 40,000 young people who are getting touched by re-engagement efforts? And then also a blank example of the census itself, and how we try to collect bits of data that we can then roll up. A program could use it internally as a way of assessing itself. We keep the individual programs' data private and just add it all together to try to tell a national story. So questions about the results orientation or the re-engagement census, and that idea of cohering around a few major data points.
Me? Either from the national data you've been collecting, Andy, or in Colorado, do we know much of anything yet about time to completion, like average time to completion? Because I feel like we're getting these snapshots in our current approach to this that are, basically looking at what happens within a given year, sort of like the one-pagers, and being able to sort of track over time is something we want to be able to do. And we don't even sort of know how to set ambitious goals for our network, because we don't even know what good sort of looks like. There's sort of national evaluations of youth build and things like that, but it's hard to know how to calibrate what good is.
So we just went through a process with the Colorado Department of Education to get data from students that we no longer work with, because we have data agreements with the school district that can be ongoing, and so we can sometimes see, did a student graduate and when, past that school year, and sometimes we can if they transferred or, for whatever reason, they're not in that exact same school or district, and so we're just starting to kind of look at that and look at what are the outcomes beyond that school year. So it's kind of too early for us.
Yeah, time to completion would represent an important evolution if we could get to that level. We know experientially that from administering the census over 5 years now, initially we were almost getting zero graduates because the re-engagement centers were working really hard, getting young people back in school. They were persisting, but 1 year was not enough to get them through to graduation. So it's only in the last couple of censuses where we've been able to report growing numbers of graduates. And that may also suggest additional sophistication on the part of the re-engagement center, that they're doing a better job of placing, or the alternative ed placements are doing a better job of helping young people move through at a reasonable rate of speed. But what that rate is, that's a topic for further discussion, for sure. Thomas? Yeah.
Thanks. I'm just trying to think about how to plug this into some of the other conversations that, especially in the justice world, I guess one of the kind of the inverse of maybe the stick rate or persistence is, have you been tracking young people who maybe re-engage multiple times, and do they demonstrate higher degrees of credential attainment or other positive measures on their second or third contact with the re-engagement center, kind of telling that story that there's no quick, especially to policymakers, that this isn't this isn't like 12 months and we're going to solve all the problems with, going to permanently reconnect a young person to the labor market.
I'm going to duck that one really fast and throw it to Mary.
We do track our redrops and re-enrollments, and we haven't really run that by then outcome attainment by time. But we have that capability, and I think it would be really powerful. I know anecdotally, in the school program that we run for students that have, been re-engaged, it takes lots of time sometimes, 3 and 4 times before someone's ready to then get that degree or diploma and get that associate's degree and all of those things. And I think that's the other difficult thing about how long does it take. I think it really, really varies by each student in so many ways.
You're raising a critical point for the public will building, kind of nuancing the message. Yeah.
Well, some of the top flight, a program like ROCA that I think is something like an average of like 7 times they'll put some of their young people back on projects and stuff like that, which I think is sobering, but also reinforces we achieve success, but it for a lot of our young people who have experienced a lot, it might take a few times.
Good. Question here in the middle, yeah.
I just wanted to know if you guys are also capturing qualitative data, and if you are, how, and if you're not, what's the next process for that? Because I know what we have currently now is kind of answering to the what, but more curious about the how and the why.
So we we have a lot of stories. They're not, I wouldn't say we track qualitative data in a way that we really analyze those stories, but I think stories always have to go along with the data to really show the full picture of a student's kind of journey. We do track a lot of the how, in our database, just like literally all the steps that we're taking with each student, but we don't necessarily we do analyze that for internal kind of improvement, but that's not something that we always put out.
Yeah, thanks for raising. So one of the cool things happening, slightly outside this room, with the exception of Equal Measure is involved, and several other evaluators started to get together in May of this year to talk about how we could have more of a knowledge development agenda in the re-engagement world. There's precious little research and evaluation going on, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, and there's real expertise among that group of evaluators in qualitative evaluation. So they could be great allies to us in a third party telling the story. I mean, it's a good practice for every program to be able to extricate stories and lift them up, but the third party validation may help. So we're looking for partners and resources to launch those evaluations, whether it's one collective impact effort at a time, one re-engagement center at a time, or across a region or the nation. It could be useful as a compare and contrast exercise. But thanks for putting qualitative on the table. Yeah. So we have about half an hour for processing, adult learning, and exchange. And our suggestion is that you use a quick consultancy methodology for that. So the way that would work is that, at your table, one person volunteers to put forward a data challenge, perhaps choosing from this continuum, and rooting your challenge in one aspect of the continuum. Take only 1 minute to describe the challenge. The others at the table take a moment to reflect and jot down notes, and then give 4 or 5 minutes of feedback to that person about what you make of their challenge, if you've encountered a similar challenge, how you confronted it, other ideas that come to mind. So that's the simple consultancy process that we recommend you use to get into a deeper discussion of the data and data collection continuum. Is that as clear as mud? Yeah. Or clearer? Yeah. 1 minute followed by 4 minutes of feedback. Depends on volunteers and active engagement. No pun intended. So take it away. Mary and I will circulate.